The fluorescent lights of the emergency room buzzed overhead as Sarah pressed a blood-soaked towel against her son's forehead, her hands trembling uncontrollably. 7-year-old Michael had fallen from the monkey bars at school, and the gash above his eyebrow wouldn't stop bleeding. As a single mother working 2 jobs just to keep their small apartment, Sarah had learned to handle most crises alone. But watching her babies face contort in pain while they waited in those sterile plastic chairs, she felt more helpless than she had in years. The automatic doors kept opening and closing, bringing in a steady stream of the sick and injured, and with each whoosh of air, Sarah found herself praying to a God she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. Please, just let my son be okay. That's all I ask. She had no idea that the prayer was about to be answered in the most devastating and beautiful way imaginable. When the nurse finally called Michael's name, Sarah gathered their things with one arm while supporting her son with the other. They shuffled through the maze of corridors, the antiseptic smell burning her nostrils, until they reached a small examination room. The nurse, a kind woman with graying hair and warm eyes, helped Michael onto the examination table and assured Sarah that the doctor would be in shortly. As the door closed behind her, Sarah busied herself with comforting Michael, wiping his tears, telling him stories about when he was a baby to distract him from the pain. Then the door opened and time stopped. Dr. Evan Matthews walked in with his eyes on the chart, his white coat pristine, his dark hair showing just a touch of gray at the temples that hadn't been there 8 years ago. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It was impossible. Of all the hospitals, all the doctors, all the emergency rooms in a city of millions, how could this be happening? When Evan looked up, his professional smile froze on his face. The clipboard nearly slipped from his fingers. Sarah? His voice was barely a whisper, as if saying her name. Any louder might shatter whatever fragile reality they'd stumbled into. Hi, Evan. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, tight and strained. Michael looked between them, his pain momentarily forgotten in his confusion. Mommy, do you know the doctor? Before Sarah could answer, Evan's eyes shifted to the boy on the examination table. She watched as he scanned the chart again, processing the name, the date of birth, the patient information. She saw the exact moment when the math clicked into place in his brilliant mind. His face went pale, then flushed, his jaw clenching and unclenching as he stared at Michael, really looked at him for the first time. The resemblance was undeniable. Michael had Evan's deep brown eyes, the same cowlick that made his hair stick up on the left side, the same slight dimple in his chin that Evan had always been self-conscious about. It was like looking at a photograph of Evan as a child, one Sarah had seen 100 times in the apartment they'd once shared. How old is he? Evan asked, though the chart in his hands already told him everything. 7. He just turned 7 last month. Evan's knuckles went white as he gripped the clipboard. 8 years ago, Sarah had left without explanation, disappearing from his life completely. He'd come home from his hospital rotation to find half the apartment empty and a note that said only, "I'm sorry. Please don't look for me." He'd spent months trying to find her, filed a missing person report that went nowhere, called everyone they knew. Eventually, he'd had to accept that she was gone, that whatever they'd had was over, that he might never know why. Now he knew there had been a why he never could have imagined. I need to... Evan's professional composure was cracking. I need to step out for a moment. I'll send another doctor. No. Sarah's voice was firm. No, please. He's hurt. He needs help. I know, but please, he's just a little boy who's scared and in pain. Something in Evan's expression shifted. The shock and anger and confusion didn't disappear, but they were joined by something else. Something that looked like the man Sarah had once loved. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and nodded. Then he turned to Michael with a gentle smile that made Sarah's heart ache. Hey, buddy, I'm Dr. Matthews, but you can call me Dr. Evan. That's a pretty nasty cut you've got there. You must be pretty brave to handle it so well. Michael sniffled. It really hurts. I bet it does. But you know what? I'm really good at fixing cuts just like this one. I'm going to take care of you, okay? I promise. For the next 40 minutes, Sarah watched as Evan transformed into the pediatric emergency physician he'd always dreamed of becoming. He was patient and kind with Michael, explaining every step of the process, turning the medical procedure into a game. He told stories and made jokes, had Michael laughing even as he cleaned and numbed and stitched the wound with steady, practiced hands. He was a natural with children, exactly as Sarah had always known he would be. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had left because she was pregnant, because she'd been 23 years old and terrified, because Evan had been drowning in medical school debt and working 100-hour weeks, because she couldn't bear to trap him with a baby when he was barely keeping his head above water. She'd thought she was being selfless, setting him free to pursue his dreams without the burden of a family he hadn't planned for. Watching him with Michael now, she realized that her selflessness might have been the cruelest thing she'd ever done. When the stitches were finished and Michael was bandaged and given a lollipop by the nurse, Evan finally spoke directly to Sarah again. "He'll need to have these checked in a week. The nurse will give you care instructions." He paused, his hand on the door. "And Sarah, we need to talk. Not here, not now, but soon, please." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." 3 days later, they sat across from each other in a coffee shop while Sarah's neighbor watched Michael. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. Sarah explained everything. The positive pregnancy test that had sent her into a panic, the overwhelming fear that she would ruin Evan's life, the shame of not being strong enough to tell him the truth. She told him about the years of struggling alone, of watching Michael grow and seeing Evan in every smile, every laugh, every curious question. She told him about the guilt that had eaten at her every single day. Evan listened without interrupting, his coffee growing cold in front of him. When she finally stopped talking, exhausted and raw, he was quiet for a long time. "You should have told me," he said finally. "You should have let me choose. You took that from me, Sarah. You took 7 years with my son." "I know," her voice broke. "I know, and I can never make that right. But Evan, I'm telling you now, not because I want anything from you, but because Michael deserves to know his father. If you want to be part of his life, I won't stand in your way. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." The conversation that followed was painful and honest and necessary. They talked about lawyers and custody, and how to tell a 7-year-old boy that the doctor who'd fixed his cut was actually his father. They talked about forgiveness and responsibility and second chances. 6 months later, Sarah sat in the bleachers of a Little League field, watching as Michael rounded the bases after his first home run. When he touched home plate, he looked into the stands, not just at her, but at the man sitting beside her, the man who'd been coming to every practice, every game, every school event, the man who'd moved mountains to rearrange his hospital schedule so he could be there, the man who was learning to be a father to a son, who was learning to trust again. Evan caught Michael's eye and gave him a thumbs up, his face glowing with pride. Then he turned to Sarah, and for the first time since that day in the emergency room, he smiled at her, really smiled, the way he used to. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for bringing him to me. I know it wasn't how you planned it, but thank you for letting me find my way back to both of you." Sarah reached over and squeezed his hand. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. They were building something new from the broken pieces of what they'd lost. Co-parenting, coexisting, learning to forgive and be forgiven. But as she watched her son run toward them, his face radiant with joy, she understood that sometimes the most devastating moments could crack us open in ways that let the light back in. Sometimes what felt like an ending was actually a beginning we just couldn't see yet. And sometimes, in the sterile chaos of an emergency room, in the worst moment of a mother's fear, life had a way of bringing us exactly what we needed. Even if we didn't know we needed it, even if it hurt like hell, even if it meant facing the truth we'd spent years running from.